This is the J. Scott Outdoors podcast on Western big game hunting and fishing, and I'm your host, Jay Scott. I live and breathe hunting and fishing, spending half the year in the field enjoying God's creation. I hope you'll enjoy hearing about our adventures. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we have a real special show. I've got two real good friends of mine that I've known for quite a long time. And I hold these guys in high regard. I've got Mike Hancock and Daniel Franco. They own and operate, co-own and operate Burnt Timber Outfitters. Mike and Daniel are very, very good at elk guiding, elk hunting, all sorts of hunting, to be honest with you. Mule deer, coos deer, turkey. They're turkey slayers. They've been born and raised in Units 3C and Unit 1 and 3A, 4B. They know all that rim country real well. But their specialties are Unit 3C and Unit 1, and it's just great to have you two guys. Mike and Daniel, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you doing, Jay?
Just fine. What kind of moisture did you get out of this last storm up there, and what are the how's it looking as far as for 2015 for elk? We're starting to, get elky down here. What are you thinking?
Well, this last storm, we didn't get a lot of snow. It was a pretty warm storm, so we got mostly rain. We did get quite a bit of rain. I was actually out just a couple of days ago right after that rain and was pretty shocked at the amount of moisture, the amount of running water that I saw in the unit, which was kind of surprising. The ground seems to be pretty saturated. It's not frozen, so it's really soaking in. Getting a lot of good moisture down in. We're starting to see the grass green up quite a bit.
So you are getting some green up already?
We are. Yeah, there's some pretty good patches of green coming up, which is kind of perfect timing for the elk. They're just starting to shed their antlers, so they're going to have pretty dang good feed going into the beginning of their antler growth process. Turkeys are going to start feeding on that green grass, and they're going to start gobbling here pretty quick. So we're pretty excited for the spring.
Have you guys actually found any browns on the ground yet, or is it just imminent and it's days away?
I haven't even been out, to be honest with you, yet. I try not to go out too early, but it's I've heard a few people say that they found some. They're kind of just hit and miss. I was out last Friday and saw some bulls that were still packing. Nothing overly big, but a couple of small 6 points and some smaller bulls that were still carrying their antlers. So it's a matter of typically a couple of weeks to a month between now and then they'll all hit the ground. So.
Gotcha. And so just for my listeners, Daniel has been talking so far. That's Daniel Franco. And Daniel was born and raised in Heber, Arizona. Daniel, why don't you give me a little background on you, and then I'll kind of introduce Mike, and he can give a little background on him and, where he grew up and what have you.
All right. Well, as you mentioned, I was born and raised in the thriving metropolis of Heber, Arizona, population 7, and pretty small town, kind of right on top of the Mogollon Rim between Payson and Sholo, kind of right in the heart of Units 3A, 3C. Lived here my whole life. Been hunting in these units since I was, I think the first elk hunt I went on with a friend of mine. I was 14 years old, so been chasing elk in Unit 3A and 3C since
What is that, 20 years now or so?
A little longer than that. I'm 40, so
yeah.
So going on 26 years now. So.
And Daniel, what do you remember as a child growing up right there? I mean, what was some of the first hunts or first outings in 3C? I mean, was it you were so little you don't even really remember it?
No, some of the first hunts that I can remember going on were, believe it or not, mule deer hunts. I can remember the first elk I saw. There weren't a lot of elk back then. This is in the early to mid 80s. We had a lot more deer than elk, and it seems like over time that has switched and kind of went the extreme, the opposite direction, where we had way more elk and very few mule deer, and right now it kind of seems to have stabilized and balanced out, where we've got a good population of both right now. But yeah, I can remember some of the first hunts we did a lot of archery deer hunting. Used to see a lot of deer, and like I said, very very few elk, and it's kind of crazy how it's changed over the years.
Yeah, and Daniel, you're married. How many kids do you have? And you've got a whole basketball team of girls, correct?
Is this a trick question? I've been married now for going on 18 years. I've got 5 girls and no boys, and I credit that to my friendship with Jay Scott. And it's been fun. It's been interesting, and now the listeners know why I hunt so much, because I have 5 girls at home plus my wife.
There you go.
I get as much out in the woods as I possibly can.
Yeah, for sure. And Mike Hancock, give me a little background on you, where you were born, where you live, where you spent most of your time, kids, etc.
Yeah, Jay, a lot of what's already been said. I'm proud to be a native Arizonan for the last 46 years, born and raised in Snowflake, which is 30 miles west of Heber, just a little bit down off the Mogollon Rim, a little bit closer to the White Mountains. So I've kind of cut my teeth, maybe out east of Snowflake and back up towards Show Low and Vernon and hunting Unit 1, and a lot of time out here in Heber and Clay Springs and up along the Mogollon Rim. So just born and bred and raised right here in the immediate area, and don't plan on leaving anytime soon.
Yep, and you've got a handful of kids yourself. How many do you have, Mike?
My kids are married and raised and moved out. I've got a few years on Daniel. I'm the old man of the group.
You actually have some grandkids. Yeah, you actually got some grandkids, don't you? Good for you. 5
grandchildren, 4 married children. Devin, my oldest son, guides a lot for us. Spends a lot of time in the woods. He's a clone of mine. You can definitely tell that. He spends as much time in the woods as we do. So love my grandkids, love my children. They're kind of spread out all over, either going to college or living in the Midwest or in the Valley. So.
That's fantastic. Yeah, great family. I know both your families, and it's just great to always be with you guys and see the family bond that you guys do have. Awesome stuff. Guys, I want to dive a little bit into each unit, 3C and Unit 1, and let's start out with Unit 3C. Obviously, the Rodeo Chetasky fire in, I guess it was, 01 or 02, has dramatically changed the landscape there. We used to hunt it quite a bit, and kind of most of my hunting it is prior to the burn. We've hunted it a few times since, but give me a little geographic lesson on the borders of Unit, and for now, let's mainly talk about 3A, 3C, but mainly where the elk inhabit.
All right. Well, the fire was in 02, so it's been about 13 years since the fire. 3C is the primary unit for elk. There's just not a lot of elk in 3A. Vast majority of them are definitely in 3C. The 3C boundary is basically starting at the little town of Forest Lakes, roughly running down along Highway 260 through the middle of Heber and then all the way to Show Low, and then from Show Low running down Highway 60 towards the Fort Apache Indian Reservation, and then all the way along that Indian Reservation to the west until you come all the way back over to where it actually runs up against Unit 23. So it's kind of a long, narrow unit. It's roughly got about 45 miles of reservation that it borders through there.
Mainly on the south, right?
Yeah.
South and a little bit on the west and the south, but the main line is on the south.
Yeah, absolutely, mostly to the south. At any given spot, depending on where you're at in 3C on Highway 260, you're anywhere from 2 to, I would say, 8 miles, probably at the most, from the highway to the reservation boundary. So it's north to south. It's not a very wide unit, very very deep, but sure covers a lot of the reservation boundary on that entire west side of the Fort Apache.
And what are you guys seeing, right after the burn? Kind of walk me through from the burn after and kind of the transition period that the unit went through, and what the unit is now, as far as terrain and how much of an effect the rodeo Chudaskai fire had on the unit.
Yeah, most of 3C is high ponderosa that burned when it came up over the Mogollon Rim from the reservation and burnt down through. So most of our country that's burned, probably 95% of it, was ponderosa pine thickets and whatnot. It stopped about time it got to the transition between the piñons and the cedars, which, is always some of our most favored places to go hunt, right at that transition, and that burn did nothing to help it. We did see after the fire, the elk tend to stay up a little bit higher, up in that new growth vegetation that started directly after the fire. I'll never forget the first year, right after that burn, watching those elk walk across that moonscaped country with just black dust coming off of them. It was quite a sight there that first year. But just every year it progressed more and more, and that habitat improved as that new growth grew up.
So in your mind, Mike, definitely the fire has done wonders for the elk in 3C.
Oh, no doubt, no question there. Just the new growth and the browse that came back. A lot of young oak has came back. A lot of young juniper. We're seeing a lot of that back. Not as much as the ponderosa, but just that new growth. The elk, the turkey, and the mule deer really boomed there from year 2, probably through year 6. It boomed really, really heavy as far as just new country for them.
And so did the numbers of elk go up quite a bit because of the amount of feed and stuff that was now available?
I think they did improve it. We definitely saw it in the turkey and the mule deer. 3C's always had a good number of elk. If it wasn't for that reservation, I don't believe we could have as good as hunting as we do. That allows our bulls to go get away from pressure and get a little age to them, and they always showed back up because it was back up on top of the rim. So they came back every year. We see bulls back year after year sometimes.
And is it you guys' opinion that the cow elk, that there's a lot more resident cow elk that live in 3C, but that the bulls winter on the res and summer on the res, but then when the rut hits, they tend to show back up on top? Is that the general consensus?
You are exactly correct. Quite a few resident cows will stick around in 3C. Bulls this time of year, we find very few horns in 3C. They're down on that refuge. You can more or less call that reservation a refuge, and then they'll all come up and rut. That's what makes 3C such a great rut unit.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. As far as the bugling goes, once the fire came in, in the last, whatever you said, 12 or 13 years, has the bugling just gotten better and better since the fire?
Jay, I think it has. We've still had a couple of down years. I know you were up here in 09 with us. 09 was a pretty tough year. The bulls just weren't very vocal. Last year seemed to be kind of a similar situation, but a little different. They just acted like it was a little bit late, about 3 weeks late. So it took them a little more to get going, to get to bugling. But yeah, typically since that fire, 3C it's kind of one of those units where it's I mean, it can be a bugle fest. You can go out and it's very common in the morning to hear, 200 bugles in the morning and bulls going crazy and that reservation definitely helps. So yeah, I would say absolutely.
Off the top of your head, since the fire, which years were more banner years, and how much of that was a direct impact from moisture, either being winter moisture or early spring moisture? What's your thoughts on that? What were the banner years that you can think of?
Well, I'm not an expert at this, but I mean, undoubtedly, you can look at 2006, 2007, 2008. Those were by far the best years that 3C had for elk. And to be honest with you, I think it was a culmination of a couple of things. I think a culmination of the feed that was coming in after the fire. It was producing feed at an optimal rate. It had the nutrients that they needed. Another thing that took place during that time was the reservation on that west side had discontinued their late hunts, their tribal late hunts, and so we had quite a few bulls that were able to return back to the res in the winter and spring and start to get some age on them. Plus, those were 3 great years of moisture. I mean, there was, in our opinion, there was no drought at all. There was plenty of moisture. There was plenty of feed. The bulls were finally getting some age. And I mean, they just exploded. I mean, it was extremely common to go out in those 3 years, in a morning or an evening and to see a 380 type bull.
And what years are we talking about, Daniel?
2006 through 2008.
Okay.
And they were just great years. I mean, it's kind of odd that it coincides with the turkey as well. I know you came up here and hunted with us quite a few times, and you molested a few turkeys up here during that time. The turkeys.
I remember right after the fire. I mean, if I remember right, they shut the unit down for a couple years maybe, and then the turkeys just exploded. I mean, I remember mornings where you guys would say, "Oh yeah, Mike went one way, Daniel went another," just listening for birds in the tree, just trying to roost, listen to birds roosted, and you guys would come back and say, "Well, I heard 26 and I heard 32," and it's like, that was insane. That was the glory days of turkey.
Yeah, it was just absolutely phenomenal. And it was kind of it kind of coincided with the elk. The turkey and the elk all seemed to boom in that 3-year period in 3C, and I mean it was just phenomenal.
Would you guys say, in general, if someone had a tag and they had an elk tag and let's say they didn't use burnt timber outfitters, they were just going to go on their own, a good general tip would be to stick to the areas that are burned. If there's areas that are not burned, like, some of the old traditional spots, maybe north of the 260, that used to have elk prior to the burn, is a good rule of thumb to just stick in areas where it's burned, as far as for numbers of elk?
Yes, it's definitely seemed that they have stayed up south of Highway 260 in that burned country. It moseyed pretty heavy across the rodeo Chetasky. And those bulls, generally not long after daylight, they're always moving towards those green trees. The oak has now grown up, so they'll stay out there a little bit longer. We've got some 10 or 12 foot oak trees and thickets that have grown up across here, and we'll catch those bulls out there, 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning sometimes. But for the most part, they want to go to those green trees. That's where they're bedding. That's where they like to rub. I've never seen a bull rub on a burnt jack pine. They're always going to go to those green jack pines or those juniper trees and some of these oak, and they'll use them as to rub. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Now I know you guys have had some of your own personal tags in 3C. I know you guys have guided for some fantastic bulls. Why don't you kind of walk through? I mean, you don't have to tell me about every bull, but just maybe starting back however long, and just kind of walk me through some of the caliber of bulls that you guys have got, both on the archery hunt, maybe the early rifle. I know they flip-flop early rifle, muzzleloader, and maybe even tell me a little bit about some of your late hunt success, or maybe save the late hunt till the end and tell me that. Can you go through some of the bulls, give me some rough scores and just how some of the different years the hunts went?
Yeah, I'll start out with, again, those banner years that we hit, just year 3, 4, 5, and 6 after the fire. And Jay, you were up here hunting with us. It was 2007. One hunt that comes to mind is now a great friend of mine, old Mike Kadich, came up and hunted. And I had to do everything I could do just to keep him off the hammer during those hunts, carrying his muzzleloader almost for me. He wanted multiple bulls, but I asked him, just give me until Monday, give me 4 days, to look for one of our 3 or 4 top bulls. And back then, we were trying to hold out for, we kind of always have a bottom number that we're looking for bulls, 370 or better. And we were looking for solid 370, 380 type were our bottom ends. And we'd scouted, probably had a handful, 5 or 6 bulls, all in a pretty close area. And sure enough, Monday morning we got on a bull. He ended up scoring 396 points. Killed him.
That was a beautiful bull, absolutely. Well, I'm sorry I interrupt you, but yeah, that was a beautiful bull. If I remember, I had a muzzleloader and shot him at fairly close range.
Yeah, we got in the thick cedars, had some coyotes help us. I didn't think I figured he was going to bed. Some coyotes got to yipping within a couple 100 yards of us, and he walked out in one of our shooting lanes, gave us about a 75-yard wide open shot, and Mike got a good shot on him. Just a great hunt with a great guy, deserved the bull. That same year we killed another 393 bull with Daniel Archery, and I'll let him go into that. That was one of our greatest years as far as I'm concerned of killing a couple of real good giants right there together.
Yeah, Daniel, tell me about that hunt and kind of when you had found that bull, or kind of give me a little bit of the story behind it and getting on it and getting it shot and the whole thing.
Well, we had a little history with that bull. We had actually nicknamed him Twister because of the kind of unique twist he had at the end of his main beams. We'd actually found that bull in 2006. Mike had a tag, and we chased that bull for about 12 days. And there was probably 20 bulls in that one pocket with probably close to 100 cows. And every time we would try to work in on that bull, another bull would come in and flank us, and we get pinned down. And it seemed like every time we zigged, that bull would zag. And for 12 days we played cat and mouse, and by the end of the season he had won. And somehow the very next year, which would have been 2007, I ended up drawing a tag, and there were a number of bulls that we had seen on Mike's hunt that I was kind of interested to try to relocate or find and see what they look like. And it just so happened that about a week before the hunt started, a local kid here in Heber had gone out messing around with elk and had got a little bit of video footage of him and came to my house and showed it to me. And right away I knew it was Twister. So I went back in there a couple of days later and ended up getting some phenomenal footage of him. Had him at under 50 yards for about 15 minutes, and knew that was a bull that we wanted to try to slip an arrow in. So we went in there on opening morning, got right on him. By 6 o'clock, had already set up on him, had him walk by at 42 yards, and I shot, and I missed. I ended up hitting a branch and deflected my arrow and missed him, and the bull ran off with his harem of cows, and we backed out, circled around, and kind of messed with him for another couple of hours that morning, and had finally decided to back out, let him bed. They were starting to bed, and about that time, one of the cows decided to get up and move, and she left, and about 300-400 yards away, we heard him and another bull lock up and start to fight. So we ran up there as fast as we could, trying to break him up because we didn't want him to get any broken points. And because he was a little preoccupied with that other bull, I slipped into 50 yards and this time made it count and made a good pocket shot, and he went about 150 yards, and he was a heck of a bull. Ended up scoring, like Mike said, 393, and yeah, just a great year. Probably in our minds, the best year that 3C had was 2007.
And was that the year then that you got another bull on the muzzleloader hunt that was a really good one, or was that the following year that it seemed like there was another 390 that was killed in there somewhere that you guys got with the kind of a kicker off the fourth point?
Yeah, that was actually in '08. However, the beginning of that story is we actually had found that bull in '07 as well. And my father-in-law, Chester, had a muzzleloader tag.
And that's the bull I remember I was with you on.
You were with me, yes. And
that's right.
We ended up getting on that bull, and he was in some thick cedar country, and we wouldn't bugle a whole lot. And finally got on him Monday morning and had him at 88 yards facing straight at us. And I told my father-in-law not to shoot, wait till he turned broadside. And he started to walk away, and he finally turned and stepped out broadside at about 130, 140 yards. And my father-in-law shot, and the bull immediately took off like he was hit. But my father-in-law said, I shot high. And I said, what do you mean you shot high? And we had a little, father-in-law, son-in-law conversation. And anyways, the bull ran off. We went and trailed him, never found any blood, never saw him again. And later that year, I think it was the second to the last day of the hunt, ended up shooting a 360 bull with his muzzleloader. So he was tickled.
And I remember all three of us, you, me, Mikey, and Chester, were all together, four of us, on that hunt, if I remember correctly. And that was a fun day for sure.
That is correct. You were actually able to capture that hunt on film, and yeah, great hunt, great memories. And then it was that bull the next year that I had guided a client to, Mike Barron. We found him the next year in 2008 with an early rifle tag, and he was able to harvest him on the third day. And the irony there is I had kind of grilled my father-in-law about, man, where did you shoot that, the big bull? Where did you shoot? And he's like, well, I know I was a little bit high, but I was right on his shoulder. Well, the next year when we finally got him killed, there was a perfectly round 50 caliber muzzleloader bullet right through his, which would have been the elk's right ear, which would have been right over the top of his shoulder when my father-in-law had shot at that bull. So he had pierced his ear, but luckily for Mike Barron, that was all he did, and he was able to harvest him, and that bull ended up going 396.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, the quality of bulls. Now tell me what it's been like the last couple of years. I know the unit, I think they've increased the tags a little bit, and it's been a little bit droughty. I know you've shot a handful of, 370, 380 type bulls between then. The last couple years, what's been going on in the unit, or are there others that are standing out that you need to tell me about?
Over the last couple of years, we've definitely seen the quality slip in 3C since about 2008. It's still a great unit, but it's definitely not the caliber or the quality that it used to be. I think since then we killed a 380 bull in 2010, 370 bull archery in 2010. 2011 was a pretty good year, but kind of a tough year for us, for our archery hunters. We had quite a few missed opportunities. Last year was, like I mentioned earlier, last year was a pretty tough year. It seemed like they were about 3 weeks behind on the rut. Everything kind of started out really slow. I can honestly tell you the best morning of elk hunting I had in 3C last year was 4 days after the early rifle hunt had ended. I went out with my video camera and a nephew and my daughter and just went out to mess around with elk and got on 10 different bulls, and they were going good, and called in some bulls and got some really good footage, but unfortunately the hunt was over. But we did manage last year to kill a pretty good bull. We had a Alan from Pennsylvania, had an early rifle tag, and last year on the 5th day he was able to harvest a 375 bull. So nice. There's still some good bulls in the unit. They're definitely a little harder to find, but
realistically, like archery hunting, what are you looking at realistic expectations for quality of, you seeing a lot of 300 to 340 type bulls and, handfuls in the 350s, maybe a few 360 and maybe, one better, or what kind of quality are we seeing there?
Yeah, I would agree with that. 3C, you're weeding through a lot of 300 to 320, 330 type bulls. There's a handful of 350 bulls. I can think of about 6 or 7 bulls last year that I saw over 350. A couple in that 360 or a little bit better range. The bull we end up killing, like I said, 375. So, typically on an archery hunt, we won't chase a bull unless he's in that 350 range or better. So there'll be days where we look through 5 or 6, 7 bulls and they're in that 320 to 340 type range, and we keep looking, until we find the type of bull that we want to go after. So, occasionally there's a bull that pops up. A couple of years ago, I filmed a bull right at the end of the early hunts, right at the end of the early rifle hunt that we kind of had guessed right there in the low to mid 390s. Last year, he actually ended up getting killed on the archery hunt, the first day of the archery hunt, by another local guy here from Heber, and ended up going 388. So, there are still those types of bulls in the unit. They're kind of few and far between, but it's pretty realistically, we're chasing 350 type bulls and better, and that's what our goal is, to try to harvest during those archery hunts. And then, of course, it steps up a little from there with a rifle in hand. So,
yeah, and just in general, the late hunts pretty tough. What's kind of the average type bulls you guys have been shooting on those 3C late hunts? 3C
late hunts, the bulls are right there on the verge of, wanting to move back onto the reservation. We do have some good spots that, we've managed to keep secret enough, and I might have already said too much, but, we're looking for bulls in the 320 plus type bulls. It's tough to find them that time of year where they're not broke up. This year, for instance, we had to hunt 4 or 5 days, but finally got settled on a good solid 325, 330 type bull. I like to call them that notch up. They're not fine horned. Probably a good 4-year-old. Got a little bit of mass to him. But we sit in the 3. We try to tell people 310 to 330. Are the types of bulls that we're looking for.
Sure. I think one of the things that's fun, having turkey hunted and having gone up there and ran around with you guys looking for elk, one of the things that's fun for me is, 2 guys like yourself, born and raised there. I mean, the idea of having a map is unheard of. And, most people say, well, what do you mean you don't have a map? I mean, but you guys have sent me on, go here to this stump, and when you get to this stump that's got, one arm on the left side, immediately turn and walk 300 yards to your left, go listen in that canyon, and there'll be a bird down there on the right. And, tell me about local knowledge and, in a unit like 3C, what does that mean to literally know the whole unit like the back of your hand?
Well, contrary to popular belief of Jay Scott, we actually don't know the entire unit like the back of our hand. Believe it or not, as far as I'm concerned, I continue to learn new country every year, little tidbit here, or, a little canyon there, or a little feeder draw here. So I know you think that we're pretty photogenic.
Well, I just think it's amazing. I'm like, yeah, I struck a bird down there, and you're like, is there a little skid trail on your left? I'm like, yeah. And you're like, is there a little 3 jack pines up there on that little? I'm just like, can I go anywhere that you haven't been? But you're being modest. How much does the local knowledge though play in your success?
Well, to be brutally honest with you, it's huge. Because, a lot of times, 3C is not a huge unit. In fact, as far as the elk units are concerned, kind of the premium elk units are concerned, it's probably one of the smallest. Previously, the last few years, there's been 150 archery bull tags, and, it's pretty common in 3C to run into other hunters. And having that local knowledge, I think, is huge, because that gives us a chance to get away from the other hunters. It's hard enough to beat an elk at his own game in nature, when it's one-on-one, and when it's you against him and 4 other hunters, it virtually makes it impossible. So, I think it's huge. That's one thing that I guided a guy last year on the archery elk hunt from Oregon, and that's one thing that he kind of made mention of or comment of. In 13 days of archery hunting, we never once ran into an individual in the woods. We'd see, hunters driving down the main roads, but when we were out on foot chasing bulls, hunting elk, we never saw another hunter. And that's where the local knowledge comes in. That's where we can get away from people. We know where to go. We know where the elk are going to go typically. And so it's easier to get away from people that don't know the unit, because they don't live up here. So I would say it's huge. I would say it's 100%, absolutely huge. I can think of a lot of bulls that, if it wasn't for that local knowledge and knowing the area and the pocket of trees that the bulls are bedding in and where they're going, and the little burn pocket that they're feeding in before dark, before they walk out into the open meadow, it's the little stuff like that has, been huge to our success.
So I've got this ball teed up really high, and I've got to do it, and so forgive me. But so in 2004, a couple yuppies from Scottsdale come rolling up there, and if I remember right, that's the year we met. And speaking of not having a whole lot of local knowledge, a couple yuppies from Scottsdale rolled up there, and if I remember correctly, we happened to fall smack dab right in the middle of a big old giant bull up there.
Yeah.
What do you say about that?
I'm pretty sure that a blind squirrel can find a nut every now and then.
I knew something good was coming.
Oh,
back.
You knew it.
2004.
I will say this. I have never met anybody that can find big bulls like Dar Colbert. That guy has a knack for finding big bulls. And
I think the funny thing about that is you're exactly right. And I think the funny thing about that is he found that bull in the archery hunt. And I actually was on a personal hunt of mine, and I had just got off that. And then a friend of mine had the tag, and Dar had found that bull, and a friend of mine had the tag. And, during the archery season, and Dar had a early rifle hunter, and I actually had an early rifle hunter too in 3C that year. And I kept begging him to let me take my friend in there and go after that bull. And to his credit, he said, I found him, and I'm guiding for my client, and I want my client to get that bull. And danged if he didn't go in there 5 times, and that dang bull, he saw him every time. And very rare for a bull to really stay in a pocket like that. And they got it done on opening day, and he turned out to be a real nice bull. But
a real nice bull.
I had to bust your chops there a little bit.
A real nice bull.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, that is still the largest bull to come out of 3C ever.
Well, like you said, what is it? Even a blind squirrel can find a nut every now and then. I will say that was a great year because we got to meet both of you guys, and we've had a great friendship ever since then. And you're being humble when you talk about your local knowledge. I truly never ceases to amaze me with both of you how you don't talk about a place on road number. You don't talk about it. You talk about it like, hey, yeah, remember where we killed that bull there, and we killed that turkey over there, and that's where we shot that. That's where we shot that bear, and, that's where the 3 coyotes came in. There's always a story with every ridge, and so that's, hats off to you guys for, spending your time and learning that unit. Let's shift gears a little bit and move over to Unit 1 and give me a little bit of geography lesson in Unit 1. We're going to be talking primarily about the elk in Unit 1, but give me the boundaries first of all.
The boundaries for Unit 1 will begin on Highway 260 there at Vernon. Again, it borders the Fort Apache a lot like 3C. We have been primarily hunting 3C for most of our lives, but here in the last 4 or 5 years, I've kind of been fortunate enough to book some clients over in Unit 1, and we've done really well in Unit 1 over on the Wallow Fire. Another very large fire that took place, I believe we're in year number 5. On the Wallow Fire, but
and Mike, did that? Sorry to interrupt, but for the listeners out there that don't know Unit 1, Unit 1 was made up of a lot of cienagas and pretty open parks, but then a lot of pretty thick blue spruce and pretty thick trees. Has it really opened that unit up?
Jay, the fire primarily stayed over on the eastern half of that, the Escadilla Wilderness. Pretty much burned completely up. It got its name from Bear Wallow, so it started up pretty high up west of Hannigan Meadow and ultimately burned all the way down to the flats, the country down around Springerville, Eager. You still have a lot of that country up around Greens Peak that still has the Senecas and the spruce up there, the pretty thick stuff that still covers that unit. Unit 1. It's a really large unit. I'm going to say.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, and back to the geography of it. Go right into the geography with it. Then talking about how big it is.
It begins in Vernon, Arizona, which is about 15 miles east of Sholo, and it runs all the way to the New Mexico state border. Virtually the whole southern section of that unit. Once you get over to Hannigan Meadow and get into Black River and the Unit 27 boundary, it's all bordered by the Fort Apache. So you've got that refuge up there where a large number, there's more elk in Unit 1 than there definitely is in 3C. Again, Senecas, open grass country, flat countries, that grama grass that those elk transition down into the pinon cedar. There's a lot of that country in Unit 1. Just a great unit. It hasn't boomed quite like 3C did as far as the elk numbers go. They did the same thing in Unit 1 that they did in 3C. They ramped the tags up. But
and Mike, they didn't actually lay off any year, didn't they? Go right into issuing tags right away, and it seems like they haven't given it a lot of break.
You are correct. Unit 3C, we transitioned. I remember starting out with 50 tags on the late hunt, and they would ramp it up 25 or 50 tags every year, up until we pretty much got up to 250, 300 on the late hunt. But Unit 1, I guess they'd kind of learned their lesson in 3C and went about it, had a little different mentality, a little different thinking there. Worried about the big boom that was going to come after that fire and that new vegetation growth that was coming, and they just pretty much ramped the tags right up.
Gotcha. And so I think you've got Unit 1 bordered on the east in New Mexico, the west on the White Mountain Apache, the north up there on the highway north of Vernon, and then the south is all along Black River. Is that correct? Yeah,
pretty close.
Yeah.
You're...
And in your mind, the hunting, as far as actual hunting, is it better or worse for, say, archery elk or that early rifle hunt after the fire or before?
Oh, it's outstanding after. We've cut our teeth over here killing some great bulls in these burns, and I go straight to that burned out ponderosas and burned out Quakey aspens country, and the elk are there. They're there in big groups. The late hunts really good. The early hunts, a lot of bugling action, a lot of bulls in the 300 to 330, and last year I probably saw 8 to 10 bulls 375 plus that we left. Not as it's not affected as bad from the drought. It's got a lot of high country and a lot more water up there, it seems too. So,
Mike, what's your forecast for 2015? Is it a real positive forecast there in Unit 1?
Oh yes, like I said, I left a lot of bulls there. It's kind of it's good in ways, but it's bad that I didn't get them killed. My archery hunter last year actually missed a straight inline 8x8 that was 380 plus. We worked our tails off and finally got a shot on day 7, and just things didn't quite come together. A lot of bulls left over that carried over that I know didn't get killed. So I'm real optimistic that with the moisture that's came this year, we're in year 5 or 6 of that fire, it's going to keep producing some really good bulls over there in Unit 1.
And Mike, are you seeing when the rut really gets kicking over there, the elk rut? I mean, do some of those big bulls pile off the reservation and just go charging out there and looking for cows they'll go for miles looking for them, won't they?
Well, yeah, you're correct. There's a lot of resident bulls in Unit 1. Actually, the southern end of that unit that's all on the Fort Apache, it's really high. It's Baldy Wilderness area. It's got a lot of 8,000 plus feet elevation. So Unit 1 carries a lot of resident bulls. But during the rut, they do come off the reservation. Those bulls that are living in those steep, dark, timbered canyons, come out and start chasing those cows in the Senecas or, working those burned ridges, and they're pretty visible. They're definitely visible in that unit right now.
Are the elk antlers noticeably different colored in Unit 1 compared to Unit 3C?
Yeah, we see a lot of light-colored bulls in 3C. Again, ponderosa, juniper, and oak is what they're ultimately rubbing over here. You get over in Unit 1, and you got a lot of that spruce and ponderosa, and you'll see those really dark-colored. We've killed some really beautiful, just almost black horns with those ivory tips. They're beautiful that time of year.
And you've had some real good success the last few years. Mike, tell me about a couple of the bulls, size-wise, inches, and what have you.
Well, year before last, my family finally struck a little bit of luck. I had 2 sons that drew that unit. Dane, my youngest, who was 21, drew that tag during the archery hunt. And again, the rut started out a little bit slow, but we had 20 or 30 bulls working 2 or 3 different ridges. And I believe on day 3, he killed a 385-inch, just massive. He was even short beamed, but just really long points and just a gorgeous bull. He wasn't even hardly rutting yet. But that hunt really sticks out in my mind. And that same year, my second boy drew a early rifle tag in Unit 1. And we killed a bull that my archery client was under 50 yards 2 different times, and couldn't get the job done, and we ended up killing him on the rifle hunt. He went 376. So 2 great
Nice.
bulls, both, they add a little bit more. They were finally a bull that I could take home, keep in my family. So those hunts are, memories that we talk about all the time. They're one of them's mounted currently in my house, and the other one's being mounted this year. So it's great memories, both from Unit 1. They both happen to just be, my son's tags.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mike, every day chasing bulls in there with the 300 tags, can you get away from some people, or are you kind of dealing with people on every hunt session?
Year before last, Jay, knowing the units and being able to spend most of the summers up there and getting more of these Septembers under my belt, we're finding places to get away from them and still find these great bulls. There's some walking areas that we're not seeing anybody on. Year before last, I was in an area, there wasn't anybody there, and this year I go back and a handlebar bull happens to be there, and I'm just battling with half the guides in eastern Arizona over that bull, and we spent 3 or 4 days chasing the same bulls till, I decided to move to my other hole. So, you can still, if you're willing to work, get off in some of those canyons and, you're mobile, you can still get away from some of those folks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Guys, I want to talk a little bit about gear, as far as, what kind of optics are you guys using? What are your preferences for, what do you always have around your neck? Kind of give me a rundown of what your gear list is, tripod, no tripod, hand holding, spotting scopes, or you go with big binos, or you go with 10s, or what's your fancy there?
We don't leave the truck without a pair of 10s around our neck. Both of us are packing a pair of 10 Swarovskis. They, like I said, we don't leave our truck. It's like our American Express card. We don't leave home without them. Now in the earlier, the late summer, the early scouting, we'll tripod up. A lot of times we'll be using spotting scopes and, long glasses. We're kind of, we're pretty partial to the Austrian optics, the Swarovski optics. So we've got the 10s and the 15s and the spotting scopes. But typically on a like an archery elk hunt, in Unit 1, if we have spotters on a hill, then they'll probably be behind 15s with the spotting scope close by. But when we're down on the ground and we're chasing bugles, then it's primarily 10s.
Yeah. And are your hunters what's the trend with your hunters? Are they using their own rangefinder and doing their own ranges, or are you shooting ranges for them?
It ultimately depends on the setup and the situation. We're packing our rangefinders with us every time. Same thing every time we leave the truck. If we can be right there, we prefer to be right next to our hunters for a couple of reasons. Number one, to give them a range, give them a distance. Number two, telling them when to draw, when to move, when to position, when to raise their bows, and ultimately which bull to shoot and which bull not to shoot. It just seems all too often, guides will throw their hunter 40, 50, 60 yards out in front of them and back up and start calling. And a 320 bull comes running up and their hunter shoots it. And our clients are paying us for a reason. It's our local knowledge. It's our elk hunting know-how, and it's our ability to field judge animals. So, by setting them in a tree 60 yards in front of us, there's absolutely no way to communicate with them. We can't tell them, if that's a shooter bull or not. There's just, way too many times people get caught up in the moment and think a bull's bigger than it is and shoot it. And that's one thing that has been vital to our success as well, is we try to get right in our hunter's back pocket on our setups and be able to range for them and tell them when to draw. And yep, that's a shooter. Nope, that's not a shooter.
And Daniel, speaking of shooter, in your mind, what's the most important thing that you guys are looking for when you're looking for that shooter bull? Let's just say it's a normal year. What are you looking for as far as mass, width, point length, main beam? What in your mind is most important? And maybe walk me through a little bit of some of your things that in your mind, your checklist in your mind that's determining whether it's a bull you want to shoot or not.
Well, I think the first and foremost, the first thing I look at is the frame size. A lot of times, the width, the height, just the overall frame size of a bull, tells me if he's worth a second look or not. If he's got the big frame, I'm a back end guy. I'll be honest. I like a big back end. And so initially I gravitate towards the back end. I'm looking at the G4s and the G5s, and the length of the beam after the G5, and if there's any extras. So that's the first thing that I look at. If he's got a big back end, if he's got a long sword point, long royals, and he's got solid fifths with a lot of beam behind it, then I immediately jump to the eye guards to see what he's got on the bottom end. How long are his eye guards? Are they all kind of relatively even, or is one short and his two's long? And then from there, get a peek at his thirds, and depending on what the rest of them looks like, that kind of determines to me if he's a shooter or not a shooter.
And are you guys, when you're looking at the fourths and fifths, I mean the distance, say from the fifth point to the tip of the main beam, where the fifth G5 comes off the beam, do you want those to be equal? Do you want the whale tail, so to speak, to be longer? I mean, what do you kind of, are you looking for 14, 15-inch G5s? What are you looking for, say 360, type of bull, or, what's your number that you go, oh, those are good fives, or those are good fours? What's your kind of your benchmarks?
We're trying to find something in that 20-inch G4 range. You can get a G4 that's 20 or close to 20, 19, even sometimes a good strong 18, and then something in that 14 to 15-inch G5, and anything over that is great, and then if he's got as much beam behind the fifth as his fifth is long, then you've got 14, 15, 16, maybe 18 inches of main beam behind the G5. So that's, to me, that's a pretty strong back end, and that's, definitely worth seeing, what else he's got on the bottom, and how his thirds and, mass and everything else.
But what I'm hearing from you, and Mike, you can chime in too, is and I totally agree. It's all about point length. Would you agree? I mean, you can have a massive bull, you can have a wide bull, and of course main beam is probably the second, but it's all about point length. And so from what I'm hearing you saying is that's what you're first looking at. You're looking at the frame, but then you're looking at point length.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Daniel hit the nail on the head of how we judge. When we move down to those eye guards, we've always gauged at the end of that nose of that bull is approximately 18 inches. So we're kind of comparing his bottom end to the end of his nose and how much curl he might have. The thirds are always a little tricky. A lot of them can lay way out, and you can gain a lot of length there. One more thing that we'll look at is how closely they're packed in there, how closely is third, fourth, and fifth. If there's only 6 inches between them, you can be fooled on a whale tail, and you'll kill a bull that's got 48, 50-inch
short beams.
Yeah. We're looking.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip for the listeners out there. Anytime they're looking at bulls, exactly what Mike said. And even when you're dealing with, 7 and 8 points per side, would you agree, Mike? You still want to have some good spacing between the points. If you see stuff starting to get bunched up, that's usually a real good indication that your beam might not be as long as you think.
Yeah, you're correct. Another thing that we've noticed is just by knowing the unit that you hunt, we can guess 3C bulls. They're going to average, a good solid mature bull is going to average between 48 and 54-inch beams. And then when you notice a bull with a big whale tail, you're going to plan on him being 50, 55+ inch main beams, that's a really good main beam on a bull. I move over to Unit 1, and their main beams aren't quite as they're put together. There's a little bit different genetics over there that I see in Unit 1. They
have quite a bit more mass, don't they,
yes.
Mike? They're not quite as whale taily. They're kind of more massive, and the points tend to maybe look a little shorter because they carry a bit more mass.
You are hitting the nail on the head right there.
Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. And the late hunts in Unit 1, Mike, pretty good late hunts over there. I know you guys have had some success seeing quite a few bulls on those late hunts.
Oh, the late hunts over there, you get a little bit of snow on the ground. You know, we've got our holes we keep going back to, and I'm sure they're just the same big groups of elk. They'll winter herd up, and we'll see 150 to 250 head a day glassing. You know, anywhere from 5 to 15 bulls in a day. We notch it up a little bit over there in Unit 1. You know, we're looking for those bulls in the 330 to 350 type, and you know, you can go deep and come sneaking up in a hole and just find a phenomenal bull, a bomber bull, you know, who's holed up in one of those canyons over there. So great late unit hunt, a lot of bulls, a lot of elk, a lot of visibility. You can get up and glass and see a lot of country. So late hunts are really good in Unit 1.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, guys, it's been fantastic. I know I'm going to bend your ear here later on this summer and get an update from you and find out how these bulls are doing in the velvet. And sounds like both of you feel like this year, with what we've got moisture-wise, is going to be better than last year. Would you both agree with the indicators that we have now that we're going to have a better year? Is that where we're at?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's great. That's great news. Always makes good optimistic springs and summers, and we'll just hope that we keep continuing to get storms here, and you know, maybe it could turn into a banner year. I know we haven't had banner snowfall, but I think a lot of times timing of the storm is every bit as important as, you know, total precipitation, so to speak.
Well, and I can tell you, we've had more rain this winter than we've had in a long time. So, and a lot of good soaking rains. You know, it just drizzles all day. Kind of feels like we're in Portland, Oregon, where we get just a good drizzle all day long. It saturates the ground. Yeah, I think as far as moisture goes, you know, I think we're shaping up to be a great year.
That's fantastic. It's going to be great to see how you guys do this year. And like I said, I want to bend your ear here in another couple months, check in with you, see how our bulls are doing up there. And guys, why don't you tell me how my listeners can find you? Give me your different, I know, Facebook and websites and all. Give me all of that, please.
Well, probably the easiest way to find us is through our website, which is www.burnttimberoutfitters.com. That's got all of our contact information, emails, cell phone numbers, pictures, videos, rates. It's pretty much got everything on there. Talks a little bit about, you know, the units that we hunt, the area that we hunt, up along the Mogollon Rim and the White Mountains, loaded with pictures of, you know, elk, mule deer, antelope, you know, coyotes. We do a lot of coyote hunting and turkey hunting, and it's kind of got a mixture of everything. So that's probably our best way.
Great.
We're both on Facebook as well, Mike Hancock and Daniel Franco. Those are, we don't get on there quite as often because we're typically a little busier out in the woods. So the website and emails, phone number is definitely the best way to get a hold of us.
Sounds great. Guys, I would like to end with Daniel, you mentioned your father-in-law, Chester Crandall, and I just feel like I couldn't end this conversation. You know, your father-in-law was someone to me that I really looked up to. I had the fortune of being with you guys on his muzzleloader hunt 2 different times. I believe he had a muzzleloader and an early rifle hunt, and got to spend time with him up on the Arizona Strip. And state senator, just a fantastic family man, piles of grandchildren, you know, piles of kids, piles of friends, and we lost him this last year. And I just want to say to you guys, I know both of you, Daniel obviously being your father-in-law, and I know Mikey, you're very close to Chester, and you know, he was a heck of a man. And, if we could all three be half the man that he was, we'd be doing really good. So I just wanted to say that, and obviously condolences for his passing, but he's sure left a legacy for all of us to follow. A family man, not a guy that's afraid to stand up for what he believes in, not afraid to walk a line and hold that line. And I just got to say, the times that we had with him, I cherish those, and I think it cemented our friendship even more. And I just appreciate you guys being on with me, and this has been great, and look forward to speaking with you guys again. And keep up your great work with all your families, and being the great guys that you are. And we'll see you down the road. And I know my listeners are going to enjoy this episode. So congrats to you guys and all your success, and down the road, look forward to speaking with you again.
All right. Thank you, Jay. We appreciate it.
All right, guys. Take care.
Take care. Thank you, Jay.
Well, that was great to get to spend some time with good friends, Daniel Franco and Mike Hancock of Burnt Timber Outfitters. Just amazing guys, very, very good hunters, very good outfitter. If you get a tag up in that neck of the woods, up in those units, definitely give them a call. And they're just fantastic guys, salt of the earth type of guys. I want to thank them for being on the show. I want to thank you, my listeners, for tuning in, and really appreciate the feedback and the comments, getting some great stuff online, on Facebook, Instagram, just some real good feedback to the show. Remember, if you have any questions, comments, or people that you'd like me to talk with, or things that you want me to go over on these podcast episodes, email me at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to go over your questions, comments, and what have you. Follow along at jscottoutdoors.com. We've got a YouTube channel, J Scott Outdoors. I believe we have over 1.2 million or so in views, and 1,250 or so subscribers. That is increasing daily. We're going to be covering all our hunts. We have past hunts on there, a lot of how-tos, a lot of good stuff. Also on Instagram, J Scott Outdoors. Just thanks for your support, and if you like what you're hearing, we could use all the support on iTunes with 5-star ratings. If you don't mind taking a little bit of time and giving us some good ratings, reviews, leaving some good positive comments and feedback there, that helps our standings with iTunes and our placement. And I just want to thank you guys for tuning in, and until next time, God bless.